Hello everyone, welcome to the Sweetly Grim Morticia. Morticia here to jolt your brain with some knowledge by taking a look at some macabre and horror-filled topics from varying views. Today we're going to dive into female serial killers. There are numerous fatal females, given there are far less of them than male serial killers. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean that these ladies were meek and meager damsels in distress. Though they tried to play the victim, the evidence showed otherwise. So we're going to spend some time talking about two notorious female serial killers. First off, let us highlight a few different characteristics of a female serial killer to help you get a better picture. Female serial killers often have no criminal history and often go undetected. There are violent female serial killers, however most women choose to use less physical means, favoring poisoning, smothering, drowning, and drugging their victims. Most of the crimes committed by women aren't the headline grabbers of some of their male counterparts. They aren't likely to torture or sexually assault their victims alive or deceased, where with most male serial killers, they are driven by sex and power, wanting to exert their power in a sexually driven way, in which to objectify and dehumanize their victims. Females are driven by power and profit. They either have something to gain in some way which motivates the crime and their behavior, or they want to exert their power on others by any means necessary. Their under-the-radar acts and MO make it so their sprees last longer than men's, lasting 8 to 11 years compared to males' average 2-year spree, with an average of 9 victims. They tend to kill people they are close to, where men often choose victims out in society. Now let us get to our first fatal female, the notorious Eileen Wuornos, born February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her mother was only 14 years old when she married Eileen's father. Born Eileen Pittman, her brother was born a year prior. She was estranged from her father, whom was imprisoned for sex crimes against children, and later diagnosed with schizophrenia. He hung himself in prison in 1969. She started damaging behaviors at age 11. She had begun exchanging sexual activities for cigarettes, drugs, and food. She claimed to have been abused by her grandfather both physically and sexually when she was young, which is tragic. She found herself pregnant at 14, having been assaulted by an acquaintance of her grandfather's. She had the baby and gave it up for adoption, later resulting in her dropping out of school. Her grandma passed away around the same time. She had to live in the woods behind her original home after being kicked out. She inherited money after her brother's untimely death of esophageal cancer. She was arrested off and on for theft, drunk driving, carrying firearms and extra ammunition, and other similar crimes in Florida. She found love with Tyria Moore, a maid in a hotel at a Daytona gay bar. She supported them with her profits from prostitution. She declared her love for Tyria until her execution. She killed 9 men, claiming that they had sexually assaulted her, which was a possibility in her line of work. However, evidence seemed to show otherwise. From 1989 to 1990, some of her victims were found nude, often in the woods with their cars abandoned somewhere in the area. Her weapon of choice was a small caliber gun. Shooting her victims was her method. Some victims' bodies haven't been found. Arrested on a different warrant, Eileen was picked up in 1991 in a biker bar. The police convinced Tyria to elicit a confession from Eileen. She agreed, and Eileen eventually confessed 7 days after apprehension. She was sentenced to death in 1992. Later that year, she pled no contest to 3 more murders and received 3 more death sentences, resulting in 6 death sentences in total. She was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality. She was executed in 2002 after years on trial and appeals. She stated before her execution, "Yes, I would like to just say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back." She was the 10th woman in the U.S. and 2nd in the state of Florida to be executed. Her crimes were driven by power and profit. Like others, she just chose a more violent approach to it. She yielded her power on her victims, all of which were men. Especially with her experiences with men in the past, it can be seen none were healthy, most leaving her scarred and hardened to men. She lived a tragic and sad life while leaving the same in others throughout hers. On to fatal female number 2. Mary Beth Rose Tinning, born 1942 in Bedford Hills, New York. She lived in Duanesburg around the Schenectady area. She claimed to have been beaten and locked in closets by her father, saying she assumed she deserved the punishments. She became a nurse's aide at Ellis Hospital. Later in 1963, she met her soon-to-be husband on a blind date, marrying him in 1965. By December 1971, she had 3 children, and her father had passed away as well. Jennifer, the third child, passed away from hemorrhagic meningitis, 8 days old. 17 days following Jennifer's death, her 2-year-old son was rushed to the hospital and died, doctors contributing it to cardiopulmonary arrest. Weeks after, she rushed her daughter Barbara to the hospital, claiming the poor girl had started to convulse. Dying the next day, she was said to have died of Ray's syndrome. Mary Beth was 29 at the time. In 1993, she had a son named Timothy on Thanksgiving. By the 10th of December, he was being hauled into the hospital. He was dead on arrival, and doctors said it was SIDS. In 1975, she gave birth to her 5th child. How no one caught on after the first child will forever puzzle me. Nathan died in the fall while out in the car with Tinning. In 1978, they decided to adopt Michael shortly after he was born. On October 29th, she gave birth to her 6th child, whom later she brought in January 1979. Mary Beth said Mary had seized. Then again, she came in for SIDS, and Mary was revived. Then she had finally passed away 2 days after receiving brain damage from being revived. She had another child, Jonathan, in 1980. Later that year, he died after being kept on life support for 4 weeks. In February 1981, Michael died. August 1985, Tammy Lynn was born. On December 20th, she died. Death caused by smothering. This one is the one that initiated the investigation. It took her murdering 9 children for them to finally catch her. That baffles me. She was charged with and confessed to 4 of the murders and was given 20 years to life and is currently in prison. The 6-week trial resulted in her conviction of murder in the 2nd degree. She was said to be vile and have contempt for other human beings. She has been denied parole 3 or 4 times due to lack of remorse and responsibility for her murders. This one was very difficult to research, not in the accessibility of information, but in the horrid act she dealt upon her poor children. Mary Beth brought it to her children by simply being born. She had no motherly bone in her body. They were a nuisance to her. She tried to use sympathy to get attention, her children just pawns in her truly horrible and wicked games. Sorry if this one was a bit too much. The subject matter does interest me, however, the accounts of their crimes and what the victims must have experienced is both horrifying and deeply saddening. Hope you stayed with me until the end, and hope you all hug each other a little tighter and have a splendid evening, my lovelies.